In other news, Kurdish officials say 92% of the people voted for independence from Iraq in the referendum. Well, that's the latest that we're getting at this point in time. In fact, what we're also hearing is that Iraqi Kurdish leader Masoud Barzani had said that just yesterday that Kurds voted yes to independence in a referendum held in defiance in the government in Baghdad. Remember, the Kurds have ruled over an autonomous region within Iraq since 2003, US-led invasion that toppled Saddam Hussein. And Monday's referendum is considered to be a historic step in a generations-old quest for a state of their own. Officials now coming out and saying that Iraqi Kurds voted for independence. In fact, 92% of the Kurds voted yes in the referendum that took place on the 25th of this month. Senior journalist Wion is now joining me on the phone line. Mr. Awad, thanks so much for joining us. This was pretty much on the expected lines, but what do you expect to happen next? Do you see Iraq now imposing a blockade? It had been threatening for quite a while.
Well, actually speaking, it is already expected. As you have said, there is nothing new into this referendum. What is new in this referendum that we all know that for the last 2 decades, the Kurdish of Iraq have been enjoying an independent, almost a semi-independent state, which is autonomous body, and they have been surviving for years. They are sharing with the Iraqi government. But now, the timing of it is important in the sense that the government of Kurdistan is trying to make sure to the rest of the world that this referendum is for the independent. We all know that most of the Kurds, all the Kurds, not only in Iraq, and most of the Kurds in the neighboring countries also, they wanted to have an independent state, no doubt about it. The point here is that it is Kirkuk, which is the rich oil state of Iraq, which is disputed between the Kurds and Turkey, which claim, and even Iraqi government say it's integral part of Iraq. Now, by this kind of referendum, it's just simply putting pressure on the Iraqi government that as a bargaining chips for the future of Kirkuk, because Kirkuk was controlled under Daesh and the terrorist organization, and when the Kurds, with the help of the American, helps in liberating that part, they are now saying this is the status quo, that this is our territory and we have to control it. I think this is a very suicidal political step by the Barzani government, because none of the neighbors, Iran in particular, Iraq in particular, and Turkey are happy with this type of referendum, which will create more pressure and more tension and more isolation to the Kurdistan state.
Also, Dr. Awad, this, of course, is being seen as a major setback for the U.S., who's been the country that has been pumping billions of dollars over the years to hold Iraq together in a way. But my question now is, yes, the neighbors are not pleased, U.S. is not pleased, the U.S.'s allies are not pleased, but what happens next now? Majority of the Kurds want independence. They voted for it. 92% at least want it. What happens now?
Well, nothing will happen. In fact, this was an American plan for a long time, that you have to separate Iraq into 3 states, and Kurdistan was part of it since 1991 during the invasion of Iraq. And even after the liberation of Kuwait, they have imposed the no-fly zone on those areas. So it was a status quo, divided Iraq, de facto into 3 states. But Americans saying that they are not happy because of the timing, but they are already for the aspiration of the Kurd people to create a Kurdish state. That's what they are doing in Syria, to create an enclave of the Kurd only, so they can, for the future, pressure on the Syrian government and the Turkey government. It's only Israel and the U.S. is in favor of this. But what will happen next is very dangerous, because most of today the Iraqi government and the Iranian have stopped the flying of the Kurdish flight over their area, which is also, there'll be more economic sanctions from the Turkish government as well. Do you remember that Kurdistan, Iraq, is a very close enclave? So there is always this neighbor. If they are hostile to the ambition of this country, then they will be having tremendous economic pressure from the neighboring country till they succumb to the pressure and come back to normalcy, because nobody wanted to see Iraq divided into 3 countries.
Right. And also, Dr. Wion, we already knew, and there was talk about how this referendum would, trigger a conflict in this particular region. Do you see the situation getting more complicated, especially after the referendum, with the threats and the kind of language and the statements that we've seen coming in from all these countries who've been very, very opposed to the vote going ahead itself?
see any future war in this part of the world, because we know that the Americans have given a red line. Even ISIS were not even allowed to attack the Kurdish area by the American forces. You remember when declared Mosul, they were moving toward Arbil and they were pushed back by the Americans. So there is enough American officials and military bases inside Kurdistan. We all know that the American will not allow any kind of a conflict to break up between the Iraqi or themselves or with the Turk at this stage, because Barzani have developed a very long, good relation with Erdogan during those the last 2 decades, and he's been giving him oil at a cheap price. He knew that this was a bargaining chip. When it comes to the national interest, there will be some kind of resistance to it, but not a military at this moment.
Right. And Dr. Wion, we understand this referendum was not legally binding. So what does it mean largely when the referendum took place, when it was not legally binding? That means it would not lead to an automatic and immediate declaration of Kurdistan region's independence. So one might ask, what was the point of this whole exercise? Was it just to anger the neighbors around?
Absolutely. There's a boost for the Barzani government. I mean, look at the Catalan in Spain, look at the Irish, look at the Yemenis, look at the Sudanese. Everybody wanted to have a referendum for an independence. And at the end of the day, then they come back and they see that this is only, it will blow about of contention and come back to normalcy, because reality on the ground is exactly contrary to what you might be planning. Otherwise, they have already been de facto state. I don't understand why he has to go except for a kind of a boost for his own governing, because most of the Kurds, actually, they're also divided houses. But on this issue, they're all united.
All right. Dr. Wion, I'd request you to please stay on the line with me. Wion's correspondent Daniele Pagani is also on the line with me right now. Daniele, as expected, it's a victory for the yes vote, but Dr. Wion also thinks that the Kurds themselves originally are a very divided lot, but when it comes to independence, they are all on the same page. But when this is not legally binding, this vote, what does it actually translate into?
So this is, Sana, you have to understand, this is very much of a symbolic victory for the Kurds, and Dr. Abadi is very much right when he says that the Kurds are very much divided. But the Kurds within Iraq are also very much divided. There are different families, different clans. It's a very tribal structure, and political parties do actually refer to families. So, for instance, President Barzani, leading the Democratic Party of Kurdistan, is actually leading it out of his very own family. So this is an exercise of power, both for President Barzani, who now becomes even more the strongman of Kurdistan, and he will impersonify from now onward the hero of independence, the man who did not bend his knees in front of Baghdad. So this will increase his popularity and his grip over the lack of democracy in Kurdistan. But also this will obviously be a very good chip on the table of negotiations with Baghdad, because now Barzani can actually, strong of this victory, can actually go back to Baghdad and tell them, look, our people are with us, this is our land, so we want what we want, which is independence. And obviously Baghdad is not going to accept this.
Right. Dr. Awad, if you're still with me, there are about 25 to 35 million Kurds when we talk about this entire region. What do you think will happen as far as those Kurds and their aspirations are now concerned, which was in fact a fear originally even before the vote did take place?
I think there is two scenarios to this. Look, there are lots of tribes, there are lots of small communities within the Arab world who have been living for centuries with the Arabs. The Kurds have been always aspired to have their own state. And in fact, it takes 30% of Turkey, it will take 20% of Iran, and even it will take more than 30% of the Iraqi country. So, and Syria will lose around 10 to 15%. If that is the aim. But we all remember that 100 years ago, it was Sykes-Picot that divided the Arabs into different states with the economic interest of the French and the British. Now the Americans feel that this part of the world should be divided into ethnic lines, the tribal lines. So if this has happened, it may have a kind of open the Pandora box in many other parts of the Arab world where the people will start aspiring for an independence on this. So there is a more of, battle zone to be created in this part of the world. There is no instability, because we all know that if this is oil-rich areas of the world, Iraq is the largest reservoir of oil in the world, not Saudi Arabia. And we all know it takes 30 cents to to extract 1 barrel of oil in Iraq. It's very cheap. So this is all happening because of these interests. The more you keep the area unvolatile, the more you will have a problem in the future, and you will have reason to stay there.
Right. Daniele, would you like to add to that, what Dr. Wion has just said?
Yes, another scenario which is very likely is that there is a conflict on the horizon. When I say conflict, I don't necessarily mean a military conflict. I hardly see a large-scale conflict happening between Iraq and the Kurds. It's going to be too difficult and too deadly for both sides. But Masoud Barzani is a very tough negotiator, so he will try. Even if Baghdad uses all its power, he will try to negotiate as far as possible more autonomy, and especially the possibility to independently drill whatever oil reserve is in Kurdistan. They have very young oil reserves, which means it's very cheap to extract, and that is what exactly the Barzani government wants. They want to continue to keep the revenue coming from oil, to explore more oil reserves, and to keep all the revenues without sharing it with Baghdad. So I see a region like Kurdistan being more and more isolated from the north, from the east, from the south, and from the west, but also unwilling to bend its knees. So Barzani will definitely, he stated, if they want to starve us because we dream independence, so let us die. So this is what he said, and obviously this is rhetoric, but he will very much stick by these words.
Right. Can I please request Daniele Pagani and Dr. Wion to please stay on with me. This is breaking news that's coming to us on the Kurdish referendum. Initial results are out, and it shows that the yes vote predictably has won with a total of 92% vote, according to the Independent High Elections and Referendum Commission. That's the latest. In fact, 72.16% of Kurds, they cast their vote in that historic referendum. But of course, what happens now remains to be seen. Thanks so much, Dr. Wion and Daniele Pagani, for joining us with inputs on that breaking story.